Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Good morning, everyone. Very warm welcome to yet another segment of Weekend with Wisdom. This is Nitin Sridhar, and today we have a very special guest, Swami Tattvamayananda ji, to speak about Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Swami ji is currently Minister in charge of Vedanta Society of Northern California, San Francisco, and he has served in various centers of Ramakrishna Order in India as editor, publisher, and teacher of Sanskrit and Indian philosophy. Before he went to United States in 2012, he had traditionally trained in Hindu Shastras, Sanskrit, and Vedic literature in his early days. He served in various centers of Ramakrishna Order in India, and he has especially taught texts, Advaitic texts like Shankaracharya's commentaries on Prasthana Traya and other aspects of Indian philosophy. So, with this very brief introduction, I want to request the audience to send, if they have any question and answer, to send it in the question and answer box and not in the chat box. And at the end of the session, for the last 15 minutes or so, Swamiji will take up those questions. So with this brief opening remarks, I request Swamiji to start his session.
योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि स्तुवे पतञ्जलिं व्यासं शङ्करं च मुनित्रयं कर्तृसूत्रस्य भाष्यस्य क्रमाद्विवरणस्य च. This is the Mangala Sloka or Pranama Sloka of Yoga tradition when we study Yoga Sutras in the traditional way. So it's an invocation showing a respect to the great Patanjali, the great sage who wrote the Yoga Sutras, who is credited with having made great contribution not only to yoga philosophy, but also to Ayurveda and also to Vyakarana Shastra. So Patanjali is a great author of one important commentary on Charaka Samhita, which is an important text on Ayurveda, and is also the celebrated author of Patanjala Mahabhashyam, which is the most exhaustive and most comprehensive work in any language on syntax, etymology, philosophy, linguistics, and also the philosophy of languages. And of course, his contribution to Yoga Sutra is well known, Yoga philosophy is well known. He wrote these 195 sutras. So you find there are two versions. According to one version of the Yoga Sutra, there are 195 sutras, and according to another version, which is an expanded version, is 196 sutras. According to Vyasa, who is the great commentator, who is actually responsible for bringing out the psychological and the spiritual and the philosophical aspects of yoga philosophy, there are 195 sutras. Anyway, that's a different subject which we don't discuss right now. Now, what is a sutra? So before we enter the text and the subject, we should know what is sutra. So sutra is nothing but a very short physics statement. That is what sutra means. Alpaksharam asadigdam saravat vishwato mukham astopam anavadyamcha sutram sutravido viduhu. Any concise, brief statement which is brief, concise, without any doubt, and which is unambiguous, no ambiguity, with a definite and clear implication, and which is unobstructed, which is faultless and irrefutable. So all these qualities put together, if you can conceive of a word symbol, that is what sutra implies. So sutra literature is found in India's philosophical tradition. There is Sankhya Sutra, Yoga Sutra, the Vyakarana Sutras, and also Mimamsa Sutras, Vedanta Sutras, and Nyaya Sutras, Vaisheshika Sutras. So you find throughout India's theistic philosophical literature, you can find the sutra literature. Now coming to Patanjali's place in Indian philosophy. So as I mentioned, in the 6 systems of Indian philosophy called Astika Darshanani, mean theistic systems, which accept Vedic testimony, Vedic authority one way or other. There are 6 systems of philosophy: Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, and Purvamimamsa and Uttaramimamsa. Nyaya and Vaisheshika are interrelated. So when Nyaya philosophy was expounded by Gautama and Vaisheshika philosophy was expounded by Kanada, and then Sankhya philosophy was expounded by Kapila, and Yoga philosophy was expounded by Patanjali, and Purvamimamsa was expounded by Jaimini, and Uttaramimamsa or Vedanta, which is another name, was expounded by the great Badarayana Vyasa. So this is the philosophical tradition. Now, along with that, of course, there are other 6 systems of Indian philosophy, which is called Nastika Darshanas. I'm going to give an idea of the place that yoga system occupies in India's philosophical spiritual tradition. In addition to the 6 theistic systems of Indian philosophy called Astika Darshanani, there are also 6 Nastika Darshanani. We call Nastika in the sense that they do not accept Vedas as a supreme authority. Charvaka system is the most ancient system. Then there is Jaina system, and also 4 schools of Buddhism, that is Sautrantika, Vaibhashika, Vijnanavada, and Shunyavada. These are 6 systems of Indian philosophy belonging to the Nastika tradition, or the agnostic, as Buddhism is agnostic, and also atheistic, like Charvaka system is atheistic. So among these, Patanjali occupies a special place. That's what we are concerned with now. Patanjali's system is called yoga philosophy. Actually, yoga is more of a way of life, a way of analyzing human mind, a way of analyzing and explaining threadbare the vrittis, vasanas, and samskaras going on within the mental system. So yoga philosophy is not only yoga philosophy, it's also a kind of yoga spiritual psychology. But it derives its philosophical concepts mostly from Sankhya system. So Sankhya and yoga are interrelated. They accept more or less the same pramanas, and the Sankhya system was expounded by Kapila, who came several centuries before Patanjali. Patanjali is, according to traditional Indian historians, is placed around 900 or 1000 BC. So many modern historians try to push him forward, making him more modern. He lived about 100 years before Buddha, that is about 7th century BC. But anyway, that is a subject to be discussed among historians. I'm not going to those details. Now let us think of Patanjali's text. It's called Yoga Sutras. We already have seen what sutra means. Sutra means a pithic statement, a brief statement. For example, in the Yoga Sutra, you can find, Atha yoga anushasanam. Yoga sitta vritti nirodha. So vritti sarugam idratra. Like that, there are different sutras in Yoga Sutras. So now you find Adhado Dharma Jijnasa. This is how Mimamsa begins. Mimamsa Sutra tradition begins. Now, here, what Patanjali did was, he wrote, or rather, his disciples must have recorded around 195 sutras. So so please remember, it could be 195 or 196, because one sutra that comes somewhere in the Kaivalyapada is split into two sutras by some modern authors. But Vyasa, who is the most authentic commentator on Patanjali Yoga Sutras, says they are together one sutra. So in that case, we have to contend with the idea that Patanjali Yoga Sutra contains 195 sutras. So these 195 sutras are divided into 4 padas, let's say 4 chapters, 4 quarters, so to speak. And they are called Samadhipada, Sadhanapada, Vibhudipada, and Kaivalyapada. I mean, the first section or first chapter dealing with Samadhi, concentration. The second one dealing with Sadhana, the practices, disciplines to be practiced. And the third chapter dealing with Vibhudi, means the results, the psychological, spiritual powers that could be a byproduct of yoga practice. That's the third chapter. And the fourth chapter is Kaivalya, means emancipation or spiritual liberation. This is the ecology of Patanjali's sutra system. Now, from the perspective, from the standpoint of a real practitioner of yoga, the order is different. So, according to the received text that you buy in markets, and according to the traditional manuscripts, so there are many manuscripts. Most of the manuscripts confirm to this particular chronology, that is Samadhipada, Sadhanapada, Vibhudipada, and Kaivalyapada. That is the chapter on concentration, practice, then powers of the results, and the fourth one, emancipation or liberation. But from actual practice perspective, point of view, you begin by practice, and then you get results, then you attain concentration, then you get liberation. So Sadhanapada comes first from the standpoint of a real practitioner. Vibhudipada comes second, because you get a lot of results. Yoga practice helps you not only to achieve tremendous mental tranquility and peace. And the most visible effect of yoga practice is you'll be able to resolve the conflict between what you want to do and what you end up doing. This should be understood very clearly. Very often in our life, we want to do many wonderful things. We may take a decision to do something wonderful, but our mind doesn't permit us to do that. That's because the samskaras and vasanas and impressions and vrittis that are accumulated in the mental system do not permit us to do what we want to do. So that conflict between the will and mind, so to speak, is a very rough approximation in English language. What I mean to say, what we want to do and what our mind permits us to do. That conflict, that paradox, that mutual conflict, that conflict will be resolved once we try to generate through spiritual practices, once we are able to generate spiritual energy and fresh samskaras, new samskaras, new vrittis, vasanas, samskaras, and sankalpas as we generate, what happens is the conflict between what we want to do and what our mind permits us to do is resolved. There are many people who want to do great things, that tomorrow I will meditate. Many people want. But the time comes, suddenly we feel reluctant because mind suddenly puts us a mental block. And that reluctance, that conflict can express itself in the form of procrastination, postponement, or a false justification for not doing. So all these conflicts will be resolved. You see what this, and this happens along with the generation of a number of results, psychic powers. Psychic powers should not be construed as something occult. If you study Yoga Sutra, you find everything is scientific. Everything can be explained purely on the basis of modern psychology and also modern science. It is not something that falls from the sky. It is not something occult. What we normally consider to be the occult or the mysterious becomes so scientifically evident and obvious when we study Yoga Sutra. So that is Vibhudipada. And then Kaivalya. When we feel that we are liberated and when we feel spiritual emancipation. So, of course, in the process, our mind, our samskaras and impressions all will be sublimated. And not only that, we feel a kind of inner tranquility and peace. And this is a real benefit of yoga. Remember, when I use the word yoga, I do not mean hatha yoga. That should be understood very, very clearly. Patanjali gives very, very insignificant place, almost unimportant to what we now call the physical yoga. Sthira Sukham Asanam. So Sthiryam and Saukhyam, when you sit somewhere in a steady posture for a long time, Dirghakala Nairandarya means for a long time without any break. If we want to sit steady for practicing pratyahara, dharana, and dhyana, or pranayama, all these practices. For that, we need a good body, a healthy body, a body that doesn't complain, a body that is steady. For that, we have to do some physical exercises. So, in the entire Yoga Sutra literature, there is just one sutra that Patanjali has devoted to physical yoga. That is Sthira Sukhamasana. That's all, just one, not more than that. So when we practice the Patanjali yoga system with Ashtanga yoga, I mean yamas and niyamas are the fundamental disciplines, and based on that, when you practice asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyanam, etc., when what happens is we feel that we are in good terms with our own mind, which is called Chitta Prasada in the Patanjali system, and more or less in the same sense, of course, in a much more profound implication, Vedanta also uses the word Prasada. It means in an inexplicable, indescribable mental tranquility, contentment, and peace. It's called Chitta Prasada. Now, Patanjali says that this Chitta Prasada, tranquility, mental peace, it is not something that we have to attain. It is our own natural property. It's our own inherent nature. So in that respect, Patanjali agrees with the yoga definition of yoga and Ayurveda definition of health. In the Susruta Sutra, you find Samadosha Samaknischa, Samadhatu Malakriyaha, Prasanna Mendriya Manaha, Susthaha iti abhidhiyate. This is the Ayurvedic definition of perfect physical health and healthy mindedness. So Susruta says, Samadosha Samaknischa Samadhatu Malakriyaha. These two lines describe the healthy state of our physical mechanism or metabolism or dhadus or pranas and all our inner system. But then Patanjali is concerned with the purification of mind. So remember, Kayena what Patanjali says in the beginning of Pranama Mantra, we already chanted that. That is, you find that Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham Malam Sharirasya Vaidyakena. So Malam means dirt, filth, something that we throw away, the waste material called Malinyam. Now, Yogena Chittasya Malam, what Patanjali did was he devised a plan to remove Chittasya Malam. What is Chittasya Malam? This karma, vritti, vasana, samskara, sankalpa, and again karma, this karma, vritti, samskara, chakram, as Vyasa says. These conflicts or actions, their results, their residual impact on the mental system, then how those old memories, impressions, and samskaras will have an impact on our mind, our thoughts, our ideas, our life, and how frequently we cannot get out of a bad habit or a bad thought or bad attitude or bad tendency in spite of our best desire to get out of it. That is called Chittasya Malam. So Patanjali's plan was to devise a means and methods for what? Yogena Chittasya Malam. So that means how to get the dirt and filth out of our own mental system. So you can listen to the Pranama Mantra. Yogena Chittasya Padena Vacham. Patanjali wrote Yoga Sutras to explain a method to get rid of the waste material that accumulated in our mental system, our anxieties, worries, and conflicts, and so on. And then Padena Vacham means so he wrote Mahabhashya to help us to use language in a pure manner without any dirt. So in order to purify speech, he wrote Mahabhashya. And Malam Sharirasya Vaidyakena, and he wrote his commentary on Charaka Samhita to devise a means to help us to get pure, healthy body. So this is Yopa Karotam Pravaram Muniram Patanjalim Pranjali Ranatosmi. Stuve Patanjalim Vyasam Shankaram Chamunitrayam Kartra Sutrasya Bhashesya Krama Vivaranasya Cha. And then what happens? After Patanjali wrote the sutras, in that tradition, another great man came, Vyasa, who may not be the same Vyasa who is considered to be the great exponent of Vedanta Sutras, but a different Vyasa came and he wrote a commentary on Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which is actually responsible for the preservation of the great teachings of Patanjali. And then the third, Munitrayam in Patanjali Yoga tradition is Patanjali, Vyasa, and then Shankaracharya. And what happens, Shankaracharya wrote a Vivarana, Bhashi Vivaranam, based on Patanjali, based on Vyasa's commentary on Patanjali Sutras. So they constitute a Munitrayam in yoga tradition. That is, Patanjali is the author of the Sutras, and Vyasa is the author of the Bhashya, and Shankaracharya is the author on the commentary on Vyasa's Bhashya or Patanjali Sutras. It's called Vivarana. Shankaracharya's work is called Bhashya Vivaranam. So you have to remember, Patanjali's plan was to devise and to create a method, a mechanism for purifying our chittam. So what means is prasanna atmendriya manaha. Sustaita vidhiyate. So who is a healthy minded person? Prasanna atma indriya. Somebody whose senses are in perfect harmony with his mind, and his mind is in perfect harmony with the Atman. That means in a state of perfect harmony and peace, That is the real state of a healthy minded person. Now, let us say what Patanjali and Vyasa has to say about the human mind. So I shall try to begin by giving a brief exposition of Patanjali's system, Patanjali's concept of human mind. According to Patanjali's system, there are three things to be kept in mind, three factors. One is bhoga, experience. The other is our reaction to bhoga, which can be positive or negative. So I shall explain this. All of us go through different experiences at a physical level, at a mental level. At a physical level, we may have pain, and also it's opposite. At a mental level also, we may have hunger, thirst, happiness, unhappiness, and so on. So they constitute bhoga, means experience. Then our reaction to those experiences, how we react to our own experiences, either as extreme liking, if our mind produces if a happy experience, if it undergoes a happy experience, then we will have a tendency to repeat that, to have an extreme liking for that event which produced happiness. So that is raga. And on the other hand, if the experience is unpleasant, unhappy one, then what happens? We have dvesha, means extreme aversion. So avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, abhinivesha, panchaklesha, even of the sutras, Patanjali says. From this sutra, we understand that Patanjali looks upon human mind from this perspective. That is, on the one hand, our experiences. Not only the experiences that we face from external world, but also experiences that we go through in our own mental world, our own happiness, our own unhappiness, our own pain, our own pleasure, and how we react to that. So, and the reaction is twofold. One is raga, the other is dvesha. Extreme liking, that is raga. Though there are many things that you don't like, but you cannot get out of it. And there are many things that you want to get rid of, but you cannot do that. And sometimes you hate something or somebody, dvesha. You know it is totally irrational, totally meaningless. You understand it, but you cannot get out of it. So dvesha can be one response, one reaction to our experience. And raga, extreme liking, drug addiction, gambling, and many similar vices are examples from Patanjali's perspective of this raga aspect of human mind. I mean, certain things that we started liking for, an obsessive attachment to something, that is raga, and then an equally powerful but opposite reaction, an obsessive hatred for something, dvesha. So, and all these are rooted in avidya and asmita. Avidya means our lack of awareness of our own mind, our own real identity, and then our own ego system. So that is a different thing. We are not going to explain sutras threadbare, but we are within these 4 hours, we can only give a brief analysis of Patanjali's world of human mind, that's all. So now, how to get out of this? Patanjali says, we can get out of this by generating new samskaras, which is called Kriya Yoga. Tapaswadhyaya Esapanidhananani Kriya Yoga. When you practice austerity, when you practice devotion, karma yoga, bhakti yoga, jnana yoga, when we go on feeding your own mind with good food, when the mind is getting good food, the mind becomes your friend. When mind gets bad food, then mind becomes your enemy. Your mind falls sick when you give it bad food. Whether bad visual, bad audio associations, unhealthy, unpleasant, spiritually harmful associations and ideas are like poison to the human mind. Similarly, good ideas, healthy ideas, spiritual ideas, ethical, moral ideas, a high ideal in life is like good food. So just as your body falls sick when you give it bad food, when you drink bad ditch water, your body falls sick and you may die. Similarly, mind also falls sick when you give mind bad food. What is bad food? It could be bad ideas, bad emotions, bad feelings that we gather from different sources. That's why in one of the sutras, that is Abhyasa Vairagyabhyam Tad Nirodha. So how to practice Nirodha? I mean, how to control and restrain our vrittis, vasanas, and samskaras. And in that sutra, the great Vyasa says, Chittanadi nama ubhaya tapovahini vakati kalyanaya vakati papaya cha yatu kaivalya pragbhara viveka vishaya vishanimna sa kalyana vaka. So he says, Chittanadi, or mental world, is a continuous stream of thought currents. Ubhaya tapovahini, it moves in two different directions. In one direction, if it flows, it produces good result. It takes you to spiritual emancipation. On the other hand, it also moves in the opposite direction. So that's why Yatu Kaivalya Pragbhara Viveka Vishedimna. When you allow your mind, your thought currents to move in the healthy direction, then what happens? It gathers good food. Then it produces good results. So the river of mind flows in both directions, towards good and towards bad. That flow, which is towards liberation, it is the path of Viveka. Viveka means proper discerning, wisdom, discrimination, which is beneficial. Then the opposite direction also is there. Mind, mental thoughts also sometimes move in the opposite direction. Samsara pragbhara aviveka vishaya nimna papavaha. Tatra vairagyena vishaya sotaka vilikriyade viveka darshanabhyasena viveka sotaka udghatite. What it means is this. Just as the mind flows in the proper direction towards discrimination, discerning wisdom, towards spiritual uplift, so also our thought current, Chitta Nadi, like a river, it also flows in the opposite direction, towards negative direction. So frequently our spiritual life, our yoga practice begins as a flight away from the negative. Frequently people take to yoga because they want to run away from the problem. That's why Atha Yoganushasana, in some of the commentators, you find this Atha means from now onwards, we are going to discuss and we are going to expound yoga. Atha, that is the first sutra. Atha means from now onwards. What does it mean? When a person has knocked at all the available doors for getting peace of mind and could not get peace of mind, then he starts thinking of looking beyond the empirical, beyond what is visible now, and then he may take a turn to something that is beyond the empirical, beyond the worldly, beyond what is what belongs to our own world of senses. He looks beyond the senses. It looks beyond the fleeting world of worldly pleasures. Then one takes to yoga. So, in the process, sometimes we may have to face different obstacles. So, Patanjali gives a thorough analysis of how to face some of these obstacles. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upeksha. He recommends 4 methods for acquiring the right food for the mind. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha. I mentioned just now, our mind becomes our friend or our enemy depending upon what we give to our mind. If you give bad food to your mind becomes unfriendly with you. It becomes hostile with you. Just as when you give bad food to your body becomes hostile. It begins to complain. You eat bad food, stomach problem. The stomach is telling you, complaining you have a problem here. So also when you feel a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of worry and tension, is because your mind is telling you, I am here. If you can stay perfectly healthy in a state of perfect mental health, then your mind will not complain, which means you'll be totally unaware of the existence of your mind. Just as when your body is perfectly healthy, you need not think about the body. The body doesn't drag your mind towards it. Similarly, you should keep feeding your mind good food. That's the only way to achieve Nirodha. Yoga, Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. So yoga is defined as Chitta, Vritti, Nirodha. What is Chitta Vritti? Whatever actions we do, not only physical action, but even mental action, will produce a residual effect on the mental system. Whatever we do consciously. You cannot do anything without leaving some unseen or invisible result behind. It is called apurvam because that particular effect doesn't originate before you undertake that action. It did not exist early. It's called apurvam. It is called adrishta because it is not visible. It is unseen. It's called vritti. And the vritti becomes samskara. Repeated and continuous activity, good or bad, will create a strong tendency. In fact, samskara is actually a concept contributed by Vyasa. Into Vyasa, we have to thank Vyasa. It's a unique contribution of yoga psychology to modern psychology. Because modern psychology doesn't accept what we normally understand by the word samskara and yoga psychology. It is not habits. It is not even tendency. The English word tendency is only a very distant, imperfect approximation to what the word samskara actually implies. So repeated actions in one direction will produce a tendency, a deep-rooted tendency, and that leads to the creation of vasanas, which solidified samskaras. And that will lead to your repetition of the action, if the action produced a pleasant result, a happy result, and total avoidance of that action if it produced an unhealthy or an unpleasant result. It's called vritti. Now, chitta vritti nirodha. Nirodha is often translated in English with cessation. So actually it is not cessation as the word implies in English language. Sublimation and transcendence. Sublimation and transcendence. We begin controlling our mind by giving our mind a good direction, by feeding our mind with good food, by helping to create a higher ideal in our life. So we are sublimating our mind and its tendencies, vasanas and samskaras. How do we do this? We are not living in the company of Buddhas or Christs or Shankaracharyas. We are living with people, we are interacting with people of different tendencies, not all of them necessarily source of good ideas. So Patanjali says there are 4 ways of reacting with people in the world: Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha. You should have a feeling of comradeship, friendly feeling, friendly attitude towards people who are spiritual seekers like you. So you should have a tendency to associate with people who are spiritual seekers, spiritual aspirants like us. And there are those who are less advanced than us in spiritual life. We should have a feeling of sympathy, karuna. And sometimes we come across people who are even much more advanced than us in spiritual life. Then we should have admiration, appreciation for the great qualities of others. Actually, respect and appreciation, deep admiration for a person for his great spiritual qualities will help us to get those qualities, to develop those qualities within ourselves. So that's why Maitri Karuna Mudita, I mean we should be able to appreciate and enjoy the company of people who are spiritually more advanced than ourselves. But then the 4th category is more important, Upeksha. Upeksha means indifference. So as I mentioned, we come across different kinds of people in the world. So how do we generate spiritual energy? Through good association, by feeding our mind with good food. Because we are not always connecting with people who are spiritually uplifted or spiritually oriented like ourselves. We may come across people who are totally different from us, whose association can create conflicts, can break your own conviction in your own ideal, can cast doubts in our mind, can create skepticism and cynicism in our mind. So association with such people can be a big problem for spiritual seekers. We should not be friendly with them, but we should not be hostile with them. Hostility, dvesha, and extreme liking, raga, will have the same effect of connecting our mind with their mind. So, upayaksha means total indifference. This is how Patanjali devises a mechanism for diverting our mind to spiritual ideals. Then one important, of course, one of the most important contribution of Vyasa, to be more specific, because it was Vyasa who wrote in his commentary some of the great, we actually expounded some of the great concepts of yoga psychology. According to Patanjali's system, human mind can be analyzed and be classified into 5 categories called Kshiptam, Mudam, Vikshiptam, Ekagram, Niruddham. These are the 5 states of human mind. Depending upon the samskaras and vrittis and how that mind actually behaves and functions in everyday life. So, Kshipta mind. At the Kshipta state, mind is full of conflicts. And Mudha state, a lot of blocks, a lot of negativities. So, Kshipta and Mudha state, in a way, correspond to some degree of abnormal psychology, some kind of abnormal psychology. In Kshipta state and Mudha state, Either one will be so totally restless, he cannot concentrate in anything, will be totally like a moron, that person is totally inactive. So both are equally of some kind of manifestation of abnormality. The third category is vikshipta. Vikshipta means it's like a pendulum of a clock. It moves from one angle to another, one point to another, one extreme point to another extreme point, one extreme end to another extreme. A pendulum of a clock doesn't stay middle at the middle, then there is a problem with it. So normal clock, it moves from one to another, one end to another end. That actually corresponds to the state of mind of ordinary spiritual seekers. So when we listen to a great talk, when we attend a prayer meeting, when we read a great book like Bhagavata Purana, whatever it is, when we listen to great spiritual music, we may feel a great inner upliftment, a great spiritual excitement. But then after some time, it's gone. Next day, when we read the same book, we may feel the same enthusiasm. So it is there, but it is unsteady. That's true with many or the majority of spiritual seekers in the world. When they associate with spiritual persons, when they read some good books, when they listen to the spiritual programs, or maybe bhajans, puja, or maybe good lectures on spiritual topics, they feel great attraction and great feeling of excitement. But then it doesn't stay for long. After some time, it cools down, like the pendulum of a clock moving from one end to the other end. Now, how to resolve this problem? To resolve the problem is we have to continuously make our effort and then generate more and more spiritual energy in our mental system. I mean, from vikshipta state, the mind should be mind should progress to the ekagra state. So these are 5 statements: kshiptam, modham, vikshiptam, ekagam, niruddham. Niruddham is the highest state, when mind is actually completely transcended, or sublimated or transcended. All the vrittis have ceased to exist. So the first step is to generate more and more spiritual energy. Because the reason why our mind doesn't remain steady in our spiritual ideal is the negative samskaras, the negative tendencies that are already remaining there in the mental system is called akarmashaya, the repository of our samskaras. Not only from this life, but from previous life cycles, we may have gathered a lot of negative samskaras, negative tendencies, and they are remaining accumulated at the lower layers of the mental lake, the mental system. They come to the surface whenever we try to do meditation. See, when you are watching the TV, no problem. You have no conflict. But when you try to meditate, the mind begins to agitate. Mind begins to create problems. Why? Because you are trying to swim against the current. So you feel the pressure. So that's because of the negative samskaras. So mind is frequently compared to a bag full of samskaras, both positive and negative. Or sometimes it is compared to a lake with multiple layers. And many of the bottom layers are full of negative samskaras. So they create the mental block or obstacles. It's called antarayas in the language of Patanjali. So Patanjali talks about 9 antarayas, which we discuss maybe in tomorrow's session. So, how to remove this mental block? You have to remove the cause of this mental block. And what's the cause of the mental block? The fact that the mind has a majority of the line portion of the samskaras belong to the negative category, the unhealthy category. So you cannot get rid of them immediately, but you should increase positive samskaras. When you increase positive samskaras, then mind becomes proportionately more friendly with you. So that in direct proportion to the amount of positive samskaras you generate, the amount of negative samskaras will go down and the amount of positive samskaras will increase, and mind becomes more and more friendly. It faces less and less conflicts when we try to meditate or when you practice spiritual disciplines. And then mind slowly becomes focused on the central, on the spiritual ideal. Then it doesn't move like the pendulum of a clock. So it's the Ekagra state, fourth state. And that's the way to reach the Niruddha state. Now, in this process, of course, one of the signal contributions of Patanjali's yoga psychology and yoga philosophy is the concept of yamas and niyamas, which constitute a unique contribution of Patanjali. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Shauja, Santosha, Tapaswadhyaya, Isa, Pranidhana. Yamas and niyamas, which constitute 10 disciplines. Yamas are universal disciplines and niyamas are secondary disciplines. But a person who gets established in yamas, the 5 fundamental disciplines, will automatically be established in niyamas, the secondary disciplines. That's why the teachers of Patanjali system, all the way from Patanjali, in fact, the list is very, very exhaustive. You know, Patanjali is the author of the Sutra, the Vyasa's commentary, then Shankaracharya's Vivarana, then Vajaspati's Tattva Isharadhi, then Bhojaraja's Rajamartanda, the Vijnana Bhikshu Yoga Bhashya Vartigam, Ramananda Saraswati's Yoga Maniprabha, and Sadasiva Brahmendra Saraswati's Yoga Sudhagaram, and Bhava Ganesha Dikshita's Pradipika Tikas. And all these, the great entire yoga literature, Yoga Sutra literature, are unanimous in one point. You should never practice complicated yogasanas and pranayama without being first established yamas and niyamas. This again is a unique contribution of Patanjali. You don't find in any other branches of modern psychology so much of plain spiritual common sense embedded into disciplines, the basic fundamental disciplines. So that's why Patanjali says, without being established in yamas or niyamas, one should not practice complicated asanas and prolonged pranayamas. Simple asanas are okay. That's good for body and also good for mind. And so also pranayamas may be okay if it is done simple pranayamas. But before undertaking elaborate and intense practice of Hatha Yoga and pranayama, one should practice at least simultaneously. If not before, one should be practicing yamas or niyamas. By practicing, for example, ahimsa, which is the first discipline in yama, ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, aparigraha. If a person practices, let us say, yoga asanas, complicated yoga asanas and pranayamas, and even concentration, dharana and other disciplines, if a person never practices ahimsa, if he is of a violent nature, if a person is of an extremely himsa nature, violent nature, and if he practices pranayama or complicated asanas. These asanas and pranayamas will produce energy, lot of mental energy, nervous energy. You feel a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of exuberance, both physical and mental exuberance you feel. So before this extra energy is generated, one should close the doors entering into negative channels like himsa, like asatya, like greed. So these are negative channels. Greed, possessiveness, then impurity, all these are the opposite of yamas and niyamas. That's why one should first of all practice non-violence and be established in non-violence mentally, physically, and verbally. Before one gets fully established in ahimsa or non-violence, one should not undertake serious Ashtanga yoga practices. That is an important contribution. And that is true, ahimsa satya, for example. Asteya, brahmacharya, parigriha, all these help you to keep ourselves away from violent tendencies, extreme possessiveness, or greed. So one should practice ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya, parigriha before undertaking disciplines which will produce a lot of mental energy, a lot of physical and psychological powers and energy. Similarly, Sauja, Tapa, Swadhyaya, Pradhana, etc. Purity, contentment, resignation to God, and then reading books and scriptures and feeding the mind with spiritual ideas, then practice Sravanam, Mananam, Nidhyasana, all these. They should be practiced before undertaking extreme forms of physical disciplines like asanas or extreme forms of pranayamas, because these practices will generate powers of concentration, powers of focus, ability to do many things. Many such qualities and powers will be generated by these practices. So that's why Patanjali says yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Of course, we are not going to those details during the short program here. So that's one thing. Now, one important thing that Patanjali mentions, and of course, when I use the word Patanjali, I always mean commentators, and commentators mostly Vyasa and Vivaranakara, means Shankaracharya, and of course some other Vijnana Bhikshus, Yoga, and others also. So Patanjali is very brief, Patanjali's Yoga Sutra is just every statement is very brief. One important contribution of Patanjali is the concept of Parinama Dukkha, which I want to want to explain that right now. In the Sadhana Pada, there's a sutra. It's called, it is a 15th sutra of Sadhana Pada you find here. Those who have got the book, you need not worry, but those who don't have the book, they can just listen. The sutra is Parinama Tapa Samskara Dukkhehi Guna Vritti Virodhacha Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekina. It has got a great practical application in our life. So the subject of discussion is Parinama Dukkha, Tapa Dukkha, and Samskara Dukkha. And the statement tells you that to a person, that means Vivekina, so Dukkhameva Sarvam Vivekina. For every noble person, because that's what Vyasa is going to tell you, all these extremes, everything in this world, in this empirical world, is full of sorrow. because the ultimate result of enjoying everything in the world of senses is sorrow, suffering. Why? Gunavisheshacha, dukkhameva sarvam vivekana, because of changefulness of experience. Every experience, anguish and vasanas and samskaras, all happen because of the conflict of gunas, sattva guna, rajo guna, tamo guna. They come into conflict with each other. Therefore, vasanas and samskaras, tendencies are generated, and all these go on changing. And whenever there's a change, there is always the feeling of incompleteness, imperfection, and that is called dukkha. Here, one of the great commentators, of course, Vyasa himself says, Ya idriyanam trupte upashanti tat sukham, ya idriyanam laulyad anupashanti tat sukham bhoga trishna. There is such a thing as parinama dukkha that is mentioned here. What is parinama dukkha? A feeling of incompleteness. Dukkha should not be taken in its dictionary meaning. In dictionary, dukkha means sorrow, grief. Here, it means a feeling of incompleteness, a feeling of imperfection, a feeling of anguish coupled with a desire for something higher. That is called parinama dukkha. So frequently, many of the exponents who came in later centuries have given Buddha's example as exemplifying parinama dukkha. See, Buddha was born a prince in a palace, and he had a very luxurious life. But one day when he was 28 years old, he was being taken on a ride on the streets of the capital city of Lumbini, and he saw a dead body being taken to a cremation ground, and he saw the face of a sick person, the face of a old man, and then he saw the face of a saint. So he saw these three pictures of unhappy, unpleasant realities of life: old age, sickness, and death. And then he saw something totally different: the serene, the spiritually effulgent face of a saint. So Buddha wanted to resolve the mystery of these unpleasant realities of life. So it created a kind of a strong feeling of imperfection, anguish, which is in some ways some kind of a sorrow, but it is not the sorrow like the sorrow of a greedy man who loses money. No, it is a higher sublime kind of sorrow. It was an elevated kind of sorrow. That's why Vyasa says, Parinama dukkhada nama pradikula sukhavasthayam api yoginameva krishnadi. Vyasa Bhashya says, what is parinama dukkha? Parinama dukkha is something, that happens to a person who is an elevated soul. In spite of sometimes experiences which are not empirically unpleasant, the person feels a feeling of imperfection or incompleteness with his surroundings, and he looks for something higher. That is called parinama dukkha. Now, here also, avivekanam vishaye ya priti avivekanam vishayeshu anupayini tvam anusmarada same hridayatma apasappadu. This is Prahlada's own prayer in the Bhagavata Purana. I'm not going into those details. So the idea is, if a person can develop a desire for something sublime and something elevating, that can be the beginning of his higher life. So that's one way of coming out of the mental block that we frequently face. As I mentioned, we began by saying, one is bhoga, then bhoga is experience, then our response to bhoga, that is either dvesha or raga. Experience on the one hand, then our reaction to that experience, which can be in the form of extreme liking or extreme aversion. This is how Patanjali analyzes the world of human mind. So one way to get out of this is to develop a higher desire, higher sublime ideal in life that will help us to get out of many of these problems of anguish, anxiety, and worries in life. So that's why Patanjali's Yoga Sutra insists on one point: we should begin somewhere. We should begin our life somewhere. So that's why the first sutra of Sadhanapada itself is Tapaswadhyaya Isapranidhanani Kriya Yoga. You can find. I want to discuss that point. The first sutra in the Sadhanapada, Tapa Swadhyaya Ishara Pranidhananani Kriya Yoga. This is the first step in yoga. One should practice self-control, self-study, and self-surrender. Self-control could be done either by the practice of Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, or Karma Yoga. Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga are actively supported by those commentators who belong to traditional Hindu Orthodox tradition. The Buddhist commentators, of course, do not insist on that. They are mostly taking a different view. So the point is, first of all, we must give a spiritual direction, a sublime direction to our normal activities. And then what happens? An element of self-control is brought into our every activity. And then self-study, Swadhyaya means self-study. That implies the need to fill our mind and feed our mind with good spiritual food, with healthy spiritual food, thereby generating healthy and spiritually uplifting samskaras. That's why Anadi Karma Vasana Chitropadi Upasthida Vishejala Chashuddhi Nandarena Tapasam Vedam Apadide. So Vyasa says this important statement. Vyasa says, the impurities of the mind produced by beginningless kama klesha vasanas. So Vyasa says, our mind is like a lake. So the lake has got many layers. At the bottom of the lake, there are layers of impurities. So whenever we try to do some spiritual practice, we are actually stirring the lake. So that's why when we try to practice meditation, japa, or reading scriptures, or even listening to some spiritual ideas, suddenly conflicting ideas will emerge in our mind. Thoughts, pictures, images, imageries, events, episodes from previous stages in our life. And of course, yoga will tell you even from previous life cycles, because the deep-rooted samskaras, negative samskaras are accumulated in the karmasaya, it's a repository of samskaras. So we are actually stirring the mental lake when we start spiritual practice. Before that, before we actually start meditation or extreme kinds of spiritual practices, we must practice karma yoga. That with tapas, swadhyaya, and Ishwar Pranidhana. Swadhyaya means connecting our mind with good spiritual ideas, either by reading, by listening, by associating with people. And then a sense of resignation to God. The traditional Vaishnava commentators of they have mentioned, of course, Ramanuja and others, some of the Vaishnava Bhakti school teachers belonging to Bhakti school have mentioned this, this Ishvara Pradhana is explained as Prapatti, Anu Ullisa Sankalpaka, Pradik Ullisi Vardhanam, Rakshashriti Vishwasa Goptutta Varanam Datha, Atma Nikshepaka Shambhita Sharanagati. The 6 important disciplines for a person who practices Prapatti or Sharanagati. First, focusing on positive ideas, avoiding negative ideas, and then strong faith in God's grace, and looking upon God as our protector, and then a sense of total resignation. If one can practice these disciplines, then it becomes Swadhyaya and Ishapanidhana together. Swadhyaya will feed our mind with spiritual food through reading, listening, Sravana, Manana, etc. And total self-surrender to God's will bring the memory of God into every micro moment of our life. Whatever we do, we practice, we do that in the name of God. Total self-surrender. So that way, what happens, our whole activity, all words and ideas, thoughts and activities become sublimated to a spiritual practice. So that's one way of beginning spiritual life. So though Patanjali's sutra begins Atha Yogani Shasanam, still the actual practice is clearly indicated in the first sutra of Sadhana Pada. That is Tapaswadhyaya Isapanidhananani Kriya Yoga. That's the alphabet, that's a door through which we enter the life of yoga. Means giving a spiritual element into our everyday activities. That will help us to practice spirituality in our every field, in every moment of our life. In the Ashtanga Yoga, which I'm going to discuss now, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, Ashto, Angani. Self-restraint, observances, posture, regulation of breath, withholding of the senses, fixing the mind, meditation, and perfect concentration are the 8 limbs of life. Now, here, Patanjali says, Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha, Yamaha, and Shauja, Santosha, Tapaswadhyaya, Isapanidhananani, Niyamaha. Of them, Ete Jadi Desha Kala Samaya Avachinna Sarvabhauma Mukhapatam. What Patanjali says is, Yamas constitute the most fundamental and universal principles of life, not only yogic life, but also our everyday activity. That's why Sarva Bhumishu, Sarva Vishayeshu, Sarvatha Eva, Avicharita Vibhichara, Sarva Bhudeshu, Mahavurta Itichate. It means every activity, in every day, every moment, we should practice Ahimsa. So that's why it is very, very important. Non-violence in action, non-violence in word, non-violence in thought. So also, Asteya. Asteya means truthfulness. So total abstinence from injury and truthfulness. And also, asteya has got another meaning, means the opposite of a tendency to have a desire for things that belong to other people. That means abstinence from theft, and then spiritual purity, continence, and non-covetousness. The reason why it is mentioned here is a person who is of a greedy nature, and if he starts practicing other disciplines that come after yamas and niyamas, then the extra energy, the extra vigor that could be generated by the practice of asanas and pranayama and pratyahara and dharana, that will take the spiritual seeker in the opposite direction, and he may develop a tendency, he may increase a tendency that he has already in his mind to have a desire for things that belong to other people. That's why, asteya and aparigraha are very important. Non-covetousness and abstinence from theft. So a person who has greed, if that person practices yoga disciplines, asana, pranayama, etc., his greed may increase. And if a person has got a violent tendency, his violent tendency can increase. So, by the practice of ahimsa, you are actually completely obliterating all possibilities of that person to become violent before undertaking other disciplines. Now, that's why you can find this, there is a statement, Yappuman Atimedhavi Chaturnam Ekamasnude Alpayu Anabatyova Daridra Paditopiva. Any person who develops extremely efficient qualities, a person who becomes extremely efficient, or he becomes extremely powerful, extremely intelligent, who develops extreme powers of capability and action and thought, if that person is not guided by some spiritual discipline, then these good qualities will lead to his downfall. Yavvanam dhana sambatti, prabhutvam avivekida, ekaikamavi anarthaya, kimi yatra tatushtaya. So, energy, health, other powers, without viveka, without the spiritual discipline, without that quality of self-restraint that comes out of spiritual practice, after practicing yamas or niyamas, if the person has got all these qualities, it can only lead to his downfall. Ekaikamavi anarthaya, kimi yatra chatushtayam. Even one of these will be enough to take him to the downfall. So what happens when all these are combined? That's why Patanjali emphasizes the importance of yamas and niyamas. Now, how to obstruct and block negative thought currents? There's a sutra here, Vitarka Badhani Pratipaksha Bhavanam. So whenever we feel affected by thoughts of greed or any unpleasant thought, desire for possessing other people's things, or maybe extreme covetousness, when we feel, then we should block it by the practice of Pratipaksha Bhavanam. That means cultivating the opposite thought currents. So when we feel like speaking a lie, we should think of the evil consequences of telling lies. When we feel extreme greed, then we should think of the evil consequences of being greedy. Similarly, we should also think of the positive qualities of austerity, contentment, purity, and so on. So there are two ways of developing Pratipaksha Bhavana. One is by concentrating, by thinking about the evil consequences of the undesirable tendencies emerging in our mind. And secondly, the positive consequences of developing the right tendencies, the proper tendencies. That is also one way of uh, uh, blocking negative tendencies. That's why Vyasa says, Ghoreshu samsarangeshu pachimanena maya sharanamuvagataha, etc. Anyway, Vyasa has got a long commentary on this, which I'm not going to details now. Satyapradishthayam kriyapalasayatvam ahimsa pradishthayam tasannidho vairatyaga astayapradishthayam sarvaratnopasthanam. Some of these sutras have got great relevance to our times. One is ahimsa pradishthayam tasannidho vairatyaga. When we practice these Ashtanga yoga discipline like ahimsa, which is the first one of the yamas, first quality mentioned in Ashtanga yoga. If you can practice non-violence, and when we get established in the practice of non-violence, then our non-violent tendency, which is so well established, will prompt a similar non-violent tendency in other people. So in our presence, people will have a tendency to become non-violent. So you hear of stories of great sages in ancient times, in whose presence wild animals also used to practice non-violence. So lions and tigers and cows and other little animals gathering together, staying together in the close proximity of ancient Vedic ashramas. You can hear the stories of this in the Puranas, Mahabharata, and so on. So ahimsa pradishtayam tasannidho vairatyaga. When we develop this tendency, with complete fruition, when we get pradishta, when we get established in these qualities, what happens? Then we will be able to influence people living in our proximity, in our neighborhood, and those who come to see us also will have a tendency to practice similar qualities. Satya pradisthayam kriya phalasayatvam. Similarly, when a person is fully established in truthfulness, what happens? Kriyapharasayatvam. Then the words of such a yogi will have the power of making those words coming true. So the yogi says something, it becomes true because he has practiced truthfulness. That is amokha vak, it means. A person whose word will become a reality. Amokha vak. So a person whose vak become amokha. Satya pradisthayam kriya phalasyatam. Astaya pradisthayam sarvaratnopasthanam. So a person who is established in total abstinence from theft. What happens? Whatever he wants, including jewels, whatever precious things are there, will come to him without his going towards them. So that is the Brahmacharya Pradisthayam Vijilabhaha. Those who practice chastity in life, you have tremendous power of intelligence. He may not be a wrestler, but you have a tremendous power of intelligence, tremendous ability to do great things. You can find great, marvelous examples of this truth. You can find a man like Shankaracharya who did so much within 32 years, writing the most profound Sanskrit books on Indian philosophy, not only in Vedanta, but including Yoga Shastras. His Vivarana is very well known, and writing the most profound and the most moving devotional poetry in Sanskrit, 65 poems, devotional hymns addressed to different deities, then starting 4 monasteries in 4 distant corners of India, starting 10 monastic orders, and then debating and traveling all over Indian subcontinent 4 times, all this within less than 32 years. So you can find Swami Vivekananda or any great spirit, Sri Ramakrishna, any great spiritual person, because they practiced perfect purity in life, so they could do great things. Again, Abhigrihasthairyam Janma Kadam Sambodha means when a person practices non-covetousness, what happens, he is fully established in non-covetousness. So then what happens, he'll be able to know the reality of his past lives. That means that's why a person who is established in yamas and niyamas should be honored. So when we respect a person who is established in yamas and niyamas, what happens, their qualities will become ours. A part of their qualities will come to us. That's why there is a great statement in Sanskrit. Sammana, asammana tapo vruddhi sammana hi tapakshaya. If you respect and honor a great man, then a part of that man's greatness, the great man's greatness will come to you. So if you lose it, it'll be yours, a part of it. But if you insult a great man, then what happens, he will not lose anything because you are not honored him, but then his negative part of a prarabdha karma will be that will be transferred to you. So when we respect a great person, what happens is those persons' great qualities, a fraction of those persons' great qualities will come to us. That sandosha anuttama sukhalabha, contentment creates unsurpassed feeling of enjoyment. So the greatest source of pleasure, happiness is contentment. Swadhyaya Dishta Devata Samprayoga. Those who practice Swadhyaya, those who practice reading of a sacred book with a sense of sanctity and sacredness and concentration every day as a discipline, with a great concentration, what happens, that person will have the blessings of the particular deity whose story is reading. Means that's why Vyasa says Devaha Rishayaka Siddhascha Swadhyaya Shilasya Darshanam Gachanti Karyecha Asya Vartante Iti. So Vyasa says Devaha Rishayaka Siddhascha. When you read a book like Bhagavata Purana, example, or any holy book, what happens? You get the blessings of those great sages and saints mentioned in that book, in that work. That is true of any holy book. And their blessings will come to you. And through that blessing, if you are as you increase your devotion, you will get their darshanam. That's the meaning here. Sthira Sukham Asanam, steady and comfortable form of staying is asana. So asana is defined in just one sutra, Sthira Sukham Asanam, means sthairiam and saukhyam. You should be able to sit in the same posture for a long time and without any feeling of effort. So pleasant and effortless. When you feel it's a great effort sitting with your spinal column and neck and head on straight line, if there's a great strain or effort, then you have not reached asana siddhi. So it should be a pleasant and happy experience, and you should be able to do that for a long time so that you can practice pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, etc. So that's why asana is defined as Sthira Sukham Asanam. And all yogic postures, whether mentioned Digheranda Samkhya or Hada Yoga Pratipika, they're all designed to help us to acquire that level of physical fitness so that we'll be able to sit straight with our head, neck, and spinal column in a straight line without feeling any effort or strain and with a perfect feeling of uh, pleasant contentment, sthiram and sukham. That is the characteristic of asana. Now we will have interaction for some time. Perhaps I shall continue next day around the same time. You can have, if you want to ask any questions, you are most welcome. Thank you. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Swamiji. The session was very enlightening, very lot of things to reflect. Viewers, if you have any questions, do put it in question and answer box. Swamiji, I have one or two questions that I want to ask you. One is, nowadays, often, yoga and Vedanta are spoken in a sense of together. Sometimes when people speak about Vedanta, they also speak about yoga, and when they speak about yoga, they speak about Vedanta. So can you briefly explain what exactly is the role of Patanjali Yoga in the broader scheme of Vedanta?
So, Advaita Vedanta does not accept yoga practice as a means for the highest spiritual realization. The Samadhi mentioned in Ashtanga Yoga, it doesn't correspond to Aparokshanubhuti as mentioned in the Advaita Siddhanta, Advaita tradition. So, according to Shankaracharya, Yoga Anushtana, Ashtanga Yoga only helps you to attain Chitta Shuddhi. Once you attain Chitta Shuddhi, the Jnana Prapti and Moksha are inevitable. But indirectly, yoga practice will help you, no doubt about it. Because all these practices will take us to a state where the mind is ready for Jnana Prapti. But yoga practice itself doesn't constitute a means for Aparokshanubhuti as mentioned in the Advaita Siddhanta. Advaita Siddhanta Vichara, that is Sadhana Satushtaya Sampatti, Sravana Manana Nidhyasana and Vichara. That's only means for moksha prapti in Vedanta. But this yoga practice will certainly make you perfect in sadhana satushtaya sampatti, and naturally that will make you extremely fit for sravana, manana, nidhyasana, as call it is. So it can be another important thing. Many of the commentators who wrote commentary on Vedanta philosophy, they were great practitioners of yoga. But most of the great, if you not only Shankaracharya who wrote Vivarana, of course, not only that, either Shankaracharya's four disciples, Padmavada, Todava, Sureshwara, Padma, and others, and also even the other succeeding Advaitins like Vajaspati, and then Srikasha who wrote Khandana Khandakadya, Chitsukacharya, and Madhusudana Saraswati's Godartha Deepika gives so many flashes into yoga that Godartha Deepika is full of references to Bhumika, Sapta Bhumika, which roughly corresponds to different stages in yoga practice. So all the, if not majority, all the great writers and exponents and followers of Shankaracharya were great adepts, practitioners of yoga. Even Swami Vivekananda, he was essentially Vedanti, but you can find, so he's the first great exponent of yoga in English language. Sri Ramakrishna's, if you read Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel, there are so many flashlights you can get in the Gospel to some of the spiritual mysteries of yoga practice. So, yoga as a practice was so widely known among Vedantis and also among Buddhists. Vijnana Bhikshu was a Buddhist.
Swamiji, you said that the samadhi of the Yoga Sutra or the Kaivalya or Chitta Vritti Nirodha state is different from Aparonakshanubhuti or Atma Jnana as understood in Vedanta. Can you just elaborate how it is different? In what sense they are
Yeah.
two different?
First of all, yoga system is essentially a dualistic system. Yoga gets its philosophical tradition from Sankhya system and completely accepts Sankhya and Sankhya analysis of realities. And Sankhya philosophy is based on the two fundamental and entirely different categories, Prakriti and Purusha. So Purusha is effulgent but inactive. Prakriti is jada but and Prakriti is the source of the entire evolution. From Prakriti, Mahatattva comes, from Mahatattva, Ahangara comes, then Sattviga Ahangara, Tamasiga Ahangara, and Rajasiga Ahangara. From these three types of Ahangaras, Panchajnanendriyas, Panchakarmendriyas, and mind, and then Tamasiga Ahangara, of course, Panchatanmatras, and Panchatanmatras give birth to Pancha Mahabhutas. So practically the entire universe, this cosmic cosmos, it consists of 23 evolutes of Prakriti. And that Prakriti, Purusha remain eternally different. So Sankhya philosophy is essentially a dualistic system. And Yoga philosophy completely accepts Sankhya philosophy. Yoga Sutras only constitute it's a deep psychological analysis of human mind, and that is completely accepted by Advaitis. The word vrittis, vasanas, all these are accepted. But yoga conclusion is totally rejected by Advaitis. So the yoga analysis of human mind has no conflict with Advaita. But yoga conclusion, essentially, it is Prakriti Lina Purusha. So essentially, it is a dualistic system. Dualism doesn't mean two. It means anything other than Advaita is dualism. So we should remember, the English word dualism means two. No, it means pluralism. The better word will be pluralistic system. So in fact, in Shankaracharya's own Bhashya, Parasparam Viruddhante Dai Swasiddhanta Vyavasthasu Dvaitino Nischida Dridam Parasparam Viruddhante Taihi Ayana Viruddhite. This is from Gaudapada Kariga, and Shankaracharya written a commentary about this. Gaudapada Kariga commentary. So Gaudapada lived in 6th century AD and Shankara lived in 8th century AD. Now, Gaudapada says, so Siddhanta Vyavasthasu Dvaitino Nischidadidam Parasparam Viruddhinte Tairayam Viruddhiti. Dvaitis fight among themselves because they are fully established in their own fixation. But we Advaitis have no quarrel with them. Now, whom is Gaudapada referring to? Not Madhva's Dvaita system, because Madhva was born 600 years after Gaudapada. So Gaudapada is referring to Sankhya philosophy. Remember. So also in Shankaracharya's Bhashyas also. Whenever there is Dvaita is mentioned, it is only non-Advaitis in general. That's what Bhashyakara is referring to. So Dvaita, so Sankhya system and Yoga system, they're essentially dualistic. My better term is pluralistic. That's I get it. And secondly, the Aparokshanubhuti, that concept itself is absent. Prakriti Purusha Samyoga, that is the meaning, that's the purpose of Sankhya, and that is accepted in yoga. But remember, in Yoga Sutras, Patanjali doesn't go that far. Patanjali Patanjali's Kaivalya is nothing but our realization of our identity with Purusha. That's all.
Lot of people have this misconception that Nirvikalpa Samadhi means it is same as Atma Jnana.
Remember, you see, you can find in the writings of in Swamiji's translation of Yoga Sutras, you find. No, Swamiji was trying to give more of a Vedantic interpretation of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Swamiji was essentially Vedantic. So, Swamiji's exposition is essentially spiritual exposition. Unlike Vyasa's commentary or even Bhaswati, Hariharananda Saraswati's, even Rajamartanda Bhoja's small commentary, they are all purely based on Patanjali's own concepts. But Swamiji, while expounding Yama Niyamas, etc., Swamiji is explaining Kodi Patanjali system. But Swamiji overlaps it with Vedanta because Swami Vivekananda was essentially a world spiritual teacher. So he is giving a spiritual interpretation of Patanjali Yoga Sutras. So Patanjali Yoga Sutras, in that respect, it is not like Vedanta or Upanishads. Patanjali himself didn't mean that. But Swami Vivekananda giving it a spiritual interpretation, made it more modern and intelligible to people. And you derive a lot of spiritual benefit from Swamiji's exposition.
Swamiji, while speaking at one place, you say when you were speaking about Ishvara Pranidhana, you said the Bauddhas interpreted this in a different way. They do not give importance to bhakti. Can you elaborate how the Bauddhas interpret this element of Ishvara Pranidhana and how it is different from Patanjali's own conception of Ishvara Pranidhana?
Whenever Buddhist interpreters expound this, they don't give much importance to that part of the commentary. And then secondly, see, I can give an example. Some of the Buddhist scholars who propagated the Yoga Vedanta, especially in Indian context, they were not as adverse to belief in God as we find the Buddhists outside India. So, if you are talking about the Vajrayana Buddhist of Tibet or Mahayana system of Japan, Korea, or China, or the Hinayana system, especially, it is much more rigid in its agnostic aspect. Sri Lanka, Burma, and all that. So, Indian interpreters, Buddhist interpreters who wrote on Patanjali system do not express that kind of agnostic tendency. They do not display that strong aversion to the Ishvara ideal. Of course, there are contexts where they imply Buddha himself. That is true, but that is not generally because if they had implied Buddha as Ishvara, that would be against Buddhist philosophy. Secondly, they either ignore it or they do not they don't show so much of aversion to the Ishvara idea as you find in Mahayana system outside India.
Swamiji, I think I have one last question before we end today's session. Nowadays, a lot of people, when they say they are practicing yoga, what they mean is actually asanas. And today we have all these courses everywhere, 20 hours yoga asana class, 100 hours class and all. So, in a sense, as you said, these asanas, when done in isolation, could lead to increase of raga dvesha. I think I got you correctly when at one point you mentioned this. So, can you suggest any practical way that they can inculcate yama and niyama in their life, in their asana practice, and how should they actually go about it? Because I think in olden days, I read somewhere that the gurus, the acharyas used to first ask the student to practice yama niyama for 12 years or something, and only then taught them the asana and the higher stages of Ashtanga yoga. But nowadays we start with the asana, and a lot of people are practicing asana as yoga. So can you give some advice on this?
Though they did not mention yamas or niyamas in words, so many words, great teachers who initiated yoga teaching in fact in modern times, like Swami Sivananda Saraswati, who is the founder of Divine Life Society. I heard he used to insist on some of these important disciplines, and many of his own disciples did that. But as for the modern commercialized institutions, I don't think their teaching can create any harm because they don't go so deep into these practices, pranayama or anything. More than asana, pranayama is supposed to be highly risky, can lead to delusions of reference and delusions of grandeur, because overexcitement, a lot of sudden exuberance, or thought, flash of continuous flow of ideas, disconnected ideas can happen. Manic excitement could happen by extreme practice of pranayama because it energizes the system, the nervous system gets hyperactivated. Those things could happen. But in modern commercialized institutions where they teach yoga, I don't think it can create any serious problem because people go to these places just to get a physical health and they don't go beyond that. They don't, only a very sincere, serious person who devotes a lot of time and energy to this practice without practicing yamas and niyamas, only such people are at risk. Others who pay fixed amount to undergo a training program, they may have back pain, they may have some physical ailments. For that they go. That doesn't generally create many problems. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Swamiji, and thank you for answering all the questions in detail. And thank you again for giving such a enlightening talk today. And we will meet again tomorrow morning. And I look forward to listening to you again on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
With this, viewers, we come to a conclusion of this session. Please do not forget to log in, join us tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Thank you again. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha.